Question. When was the last time you felt seen? Abby, let's start with you.
For me, it's pretty easy. It was, 3 days ago. I was talking to a friend about a challenge and difficulty in my life. And I just felt heard. I felt not judged. I felt like I could express myself fully, kind of like a little girl, you know? And after that, I just felt like at peace. I just had to take it out. So that's the last time for me.
What about you, Mike?
So I think from the first episode, I've already kind of told you guys, explained to the podcast that I've got a new job now and everything like that. And one of the reasons why I decided to go to another job, still in the same field, but another company, was because I felt like I wasn't just kind of accepted where I was, connecting with people. I kind of felt alone and things like that. So I thought it was time to make a change. I mean, there was great people at my other company that I was able to, know, but I just felt like in general, it wasn't a good fit. But now this new company that I've been at for a few months, just so everybody knows, I work for a private ambulance company. The new company I work for now is in Milwaukee. And so, we, as the nature of the job, we have to work with a lot of people for long periods of time. And so it's good to have like a good relationship with the people you're working with. You're not just by yourself. So at this company, right off the bat, I just kind of felt accepted. I've had people reach out to me, want to get to know me, and like the conversations and things that I bring out, because I'm kind of like a deep talker. And so the conversations that I want to have, they're not just like brushed off or people kind of run from them. People want to talk to me, want to have conversations, want to have discussions. And it just makes for an enjoyable work time, because we have a lot of hours where we're running calls. And so you have to be able to connect with, your partner, and it helps with patient care. And it just helps not get burned out because we work a lot of crazy hours. So, recently I've been able to go rock climbing with, a couple of the guys that I work with. We've gone out to eat. I've been able to even, talk about my faith, which is something that, I got some opportunities to do at my other job, but not so like quickly and not so, I guess, for a long period of time. We've just had great conversations. So that's been good. And I'm glad people have been able to see me as that person and respect me for the type of person I am.
I like that.
They saw that you were cool.
I was cool?
Yeah.
I mean,
who wouldn't know that? For me, it was a couple weeks ago. I think I was sitting here preparing for this season, and then I was just sitting on the couch, and Michael, you weren't here, and all of a sudden I get a call from Mom. Hey, how are you? Blah blah blah, and she's like, Hey, I only have a question for you. Do you feel X and Y right now? And I'm like, how do you know? And as it turns out, I had just been to the house. She had, I guess, sensed something in my demeanor, in my tone, or something like that. That she had just noticed something that I guess was underneath, but I hadn't put enough effort to even like recognize. But as soon as she pointed it out, I'm like, oh man, this is real. I don't know how you noticed this, but the fact that you know me enough to see me in that way just made me feel a certain type of special. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Mothers are great at doing that.
Yeah.
So
When we're younger, we hate it. And then when you get older, you appreciate it.
That's right. Hello, my name is Josue Peralta. I'm here joined by my sister Abby and my buddy Mike. How are you guys today?
Doing good.
doing good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It was a busy day for me. All I did was edit. I've been editing for 3 days straight. I hate it now.
That sounds terrible.
It's all for a good cause. How was your day, Doc?
It was pretty emotional. It was a day of letting go and thanking God for the time that I had with my car.
Oh, shoot.
Wow.
So I'm thankful for the time I had it, and I let it go. And if it goes to a family who deserves it, Praise God.
There you go.
There you go.
How are you, Mikey? Doing all right?
Yeah, just busy too. I mean, we live in the same place. For those of you who don't know, it's it's kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, like we're both. Sometimes I forget we're even roommates because there's periods of time where we don't even see each other because we're always.
I mean,
busy.
I got here and it was dark. I'm like, where's Michael? Where's Josh? It's like such a boy pat.
in the corner studying. I'm also editing things. There's so much stuff that's on my plate. It's crazy, but take each step at a time, day by day.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. So today's topic is on how do I get to know someone? And as we've been building on this season, the first episode was kind of just setting up the season, what we were going to do, recapping a little bit of last season that we learned a little bit more about, getting to know ourselves and making sure that we know what we want, that we get ourselves together spiritually and otherwise, so that when we enter the dating pool, we can be ready for it. Last week, we talked about, who do I date? So we talked about, different considerations, things to consider, whether it was, values or age or distance or whatever it was. But today I want to get to know a little bit about how do we get to know someone and what that actually means. I think it's utterly important because dating, which is the precursor to marriage, is one of the two biggest decisions that you'll ever make, which is, who you're going to join your life with and what are you going to do with your life. This is something you can't mess up, per se. And I know that sounds heavy. It's something that we really need to find out in terms of like getting to really know someone, whether we really should pursue that. And also make sure that we are also seen by that person. So what do you think, Doc?
I think that I lost my train of thought. Go, Michael.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I think it's very important as for any relationship that you're in. You want to get to know that person. I think it's important to discuss, like, what that even looks like. What does getting to know someone look like in preparation for dating? Like, how well should you know someone? What are the important things to know about someone?
Exactly, yeah.
So I think those are all things you should think about. Especially if you're intentional in your dating, and as Christians, that's I think how we should date. Intentional, a means to an end, not just something casual. So I think it's very important, obviously, at least obvious for me.
Okay. So I remember now. So I think this topic is really important because it might seem obvious of like, oh, how do you get to know somebody? We should all know, right? But I feel like since the beginning of time, like creation, we as people, we've been going down. We've been declining, both physically, mentally. Like people back then were taller. They were younger. They stayed younger forever. Like their mental capacities were so much better.
We can thank Ellen White for that insight.
Resiliency, right? Like over time, resiliency is going down. And we're at a time where we have lots of information, lots of books of like how to make friends and influence people or how to like do the best you can. But I feel like our processing systems are not up to par to the knowledge anymore. So it's like, sure, you read a book, but like you're awkward. It's like, how do I actually do this? So I feel like the more we talk about it and normalize it, kind of try to fill that gap of that awkwardness that's becoming more and more as the generations go on.
That's true.
No, I agree. And I think another reason we need to put importance on how we get to know someone is because whether we like it or not, we tend to put up a front. Now, oftentimes we've done the internal work to where our front is more similar to who we really are than more people. But there are other people who spend more time on their persona than who they really are. So knowing and using the tools to really get to know someone is very useful to knowing how to let God discern or give you discernment, forgive me, to really get to know someone for who they are and seeing if whether, you should continue getting to know them.
Yeah, especially in the age of social media and cell phones. Like, I feel like a lot of us naturally have a front where we're not truly who we are, like, or who we want people to see us as. And I think it's important to like talk about it so people can like actually be comfortable in letting someone know who they are, and maybe trying to work on like how to get to know who someone truly is and being that person that they can open up to. So good points.
Yeah.
No.
And I also think, it's just a natural thing to have a mask, and want to protect ourselves. I think it comes down to when you're using the mask, what is your intention? If you're like wanting to hide and not wanting people to see you, then it's like negative. But it's more of like for protection of like whatever situation it may be. So like, since we can't judge people's intentions, we can only see the mask. So it's like learning how to navigate that. It's so interesting to me.
Very true. Now, I think this topic is a little bit too heavy for us, and we've called in the cavalry. And we actually have some guests who we're going to introduce here in a little bit, but we've known them for quite a long time.
Yes.
But Abby, who are we talking about today?
So we're talking about Greg and Kim Taylor. They were like, in my mind, because I was like a teenager. So like they were like the power couple of Camp Wakanda.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Greg and Kim Taylor, they're not just a pastoral team. One thing that we all appreciate is their marriage. I would actually venture to go as far as to say that their marriage to me is aspirational. Now, they haven't been in Wisconsin for a while, but just from what we've been seeing on social media, it's just you can tell, you can read between the lines and see something that there are just some marriages that don't have. And that's, some chemistry that just couples don't have.
It's God, man. It just, the ministry just unites them. It's the flame.
And specifically, I remember Greg, I don't remember the context or anything, but we were sitting like by the, the basketball court at Wakanda. That was the first time I ever heard the concept of in a relationship, there isn't 50-50. There's only 100-100. And that always stuck with me. And then I kept I kept hearing it thereafter, just like constantly. And I'm like, why do I keep hearing it? And it's like, because, okay, it's real and it works.
Yeah. I just appreciate, first and foremost, just the passion for ministry that they both have, and just like what can be accomplished when two people are, come together and want to work for God.
So that's enough of a foreword. I think it's time to introduce our valued guests. Welcome, Greg and Kim. How are you guys?
Hello.
Well, after that introduction, I'm feeling like the king of the world. That was so nice.
Happy to be with you.
Tell us, we haven't seen you in a while. What's going on in your world?
So we have just moved like a year ago from full-time camp ministry to the Southern Union Youth Department, which oversees all 8 conferences of the Southern Union. And we get to go to all of the different camps and support their ministries and mentor and train. And it has been incredible, but we are on the road a
lot of
ton.
travel. Yes.
That's so great.
How are the kids? How are the boys?
That's what I was just going to say. Like, it is crazy because the last time you saw them, they were little rugrats. And now Matthew actually is 20 years old. He's a sophomore, technically a junior at Southern Adventist University. And he is a communications major.
And our youngest, Joshua, who is, little baby Josh, is now 6'2", almost 6'3".
I was going to say, he looks tall in those pictures.
Yeah,
I was like, man,
I'm so proud
it's not fair.
And our claim to fame this last weekend was that Matthew got to interview Riley Clemens in front of 1,000 people. It was incredible.
Wow.
That's so cool.
That's awesome.
Very proud parents.
So how's
We're
been
old.
like that transition from, well, first of all, like what is your actual title now? Like, I mean, because I can't call you like camp director. I mean, I can still call you pastor, you know.
So it's interesting because that's a long story. We probably don't have time on your podcast to tell the whole thing, but God starts to prepare you. We were starting to get other calls to being a vice president or maybe even pastoring in other churches and things like that. And I just wasn't sure that was kind of, where God wanted us. And one of my mentors actually said the words, he said, Greg, God's going to put it strongly in your heart that you're going to want to help others do what you do. That mentoring thing. And when he said that, we received this call to be the Southern Union Youth and Young Adult. I'm the director. She's the Southern Union Youth and Young Adult coordinator, which means we get to work together. But yeah,
awesome.
it's been pretty incredible because we have a lot of new youth directors and so there wasn't kind of like why do I answer to this guy or why do I, it's been a seamless, pretty awesome transition into supporting, a mentoring, just a partnership role, trying to help those, because we've experienced a lot as youth directors. We've made a lot of mistakes and, we've had some Holy Spirit success that we praise God for and kind of given us some things to share with others.
So as Mike told you a little bit about already, our podcast is about dating and relationships and to pursuit towards a godly life, but we're taking the lens of relationship. Now, we started this because we felt that this conversation wasn't really had on a wider scale. And Esmeralda and Abby and I had been talking about it for a long time. And I'd been bugging her. I'm like, Abby, we should do this. We should definitely do this. And then there was a catalyst last year that kind of made me just pull the trigger and do it. And we had a little modicum of success and we're really excited about it. But we're really interested in your insight and know a little bit about what your life was like during the stage that we're currently at. Now, I know that was different for you guys. Like my brother got married at 23. We know some of our other friends who got married at 24, 25, things like that. So we feel like we're a little bit behind them at least. But I'm curious to hear, what were you guys like before you met? So like single Greg and single Kim, what were you like?
So she always tells me that if she had known me in high school, she wouldn't have dated me. I don't know why she says that. So maybe
I wouldn't have. I will say that 100%.
Don't be that. I was a nice kid.
Okay, it's because I think when you're a teenager, you're just so self-involved and you just want to just show off everything. And I am not into that.
You saying that was me?
Yes, that was me. So even when I met him, he was 18. And he still was a bit cocky for my taste.
Let me go at it a different angle. But
Let's hear from Greg.
Interestingly, I was going to go at it from this angle. She came in, to this day, her parents are in love. They are in their 80s, and they just just flirt with each other still. It's so adorable. And so she saw this growing up. It was modeled to her, where I come from a pretty messy, broken home. And so kind of what you guys are talking about is she came everything's great, flowers blooming, let's go make this thing happen. And I came from the perspective of what did I learn that I'm going to bring into this thing? What am I going to break? So even though, there's a little cockiness in there too, but we came at this relationship from two very different foundations.
But another thing you need to know about me before we met is that I had dated a guy in high school for 4 years. And so into college.
They had you married off.
They did. All our friends thought we were getting married, and so that I had just gotten out of before I met Greg.
Hallelujah.
And so that was hard for me to be ready for a new relationship. And I really had to converse with God a lot because I felt myself being attracted to him, but was like, okay, no, like not right now because I'm not ready. And so I know I'm probably getting a little ahead of it, but I wanted you to know what we were feeling as, you know, as we started having feelings for each other.
My prayers were different than hers.
What were those prayers?
Lord, please make this happen.
That's right.
Not my will, but your will. But please let this be your will.
That sounds about right.
Now, to give you a little bit more about, you know, us individually, like I was already, before I met him, I was a senior in college. I was starting to have a little bit of an identity crisis because, number one, I had just broken up with my boyfriend of 4 years. Number two, I had been taking education classes and I realized I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a teacher anymore. And number three, I was about to go to Argentina for the year. And that was where I was going to really find myself because being away from everything, that really put me to the test. And so because of that, like that's where I was when I met Greg. And so all of that upheaval made it a little harder for me to be ready to jump into a relationship as well.
Wow. And what were each of you looking for? I mean, you started dating at what age, if I may?
You ready for this? I was 21.
I was 18.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the other issue was that I was like, okay, he is barely an adult. But like, but
I had my junior year of high school, I came into the conversion to Christianity. I mean, I was born and raised, but you know, of course, with what I shared with the broken home, with some things that had happened, I didn't really have a foundation. I didn't know that I had really chosen faith myself. And I had an incredible, this will probably be another episode for your podcast, but I had a pretty amazing conversion experience in which it kind of became very clear not only that did I want to choose Christ, but Christ had chosen me. And the call to ministry, I felt that for the first time my junior year of high school. But I also realized that I realized very quickly in my pursuit of understanding what had happened in my broken home that I really needed to figure out what this love thing was all about and what a healthy relationship really looked like.
That's
and
real.
I think that's one of the crazy things is so many times it's this psychological thing. We look for someone we can fix and we think that's love. You know, we look for someone who's broken and we try to fix them, and that's the basis of a relationship. Instead of realizing, like Josue, you mentioned the 100-100, there are times, yes, absolutely, I want to be there to help and support and love and prayerfully be there for my spouse, but man, I'm going to need it too. You know, I'm going to need someone in a relationship that's going to lift me up during my dark times, during my difficult times. So I think I knew early on, earlier than most people know early on, that I needed someone that would be a support for me as well, not just someone I could support in a relationship.
yeah. And I would add, for me, I was looking for someone musical. I was looking for someone that loved children because I was going to be a teacher. And so I was like, I need to have a teammate in this, you know, in this ministry of education.
You weren't looking for a pastor, though.
No.
Wow. Yeah.
Not
I
many
got
are.
tricked into that one. But I was looking for someone that definitely would be, you know, the pastoral head of our family for sure. You know, I wanted someone that I could study with, that I could pray with. And so these were all things I was looking for. And, you know, those are hard things to discover right off if, you know, you're just getting to know someone, you know, is this someone that I can pray with? Is this someone that I can study with? Like, and it's hard to know.
Support me spiritually.
Exactly.
Wow. So when did you actually meet? So you started dating at 21 and 18. How did you meet, and who was interested first?
Okay, I get to start this one. So we had a common friend, and he was an education major with me at Andrews, but he had gone to academy with him. And so he knew that we were both going to end up at this same camp for the summer. And so it was Camp Cedar Falls out in California. And he's like, "Oh, you're going to meet my friend Greg." And he
I had
told
the best pickup line from the very beginning.
No, it was me that started it, though.
Yeah, you kind of, and
Yes,
I hit it off.
and he hit it. Yeah. So I knew that I was going to be meeting him out at camp. Didn't know anything about him. Like, he didn't tell me anything about him. He just said, "Oh, you're going to meet my friend Greg." So we got there. I knew he was from Ohio. And so I got in line behind him in the lunch line or whatever. And so he turned around and I said, "So are you the guy I'm supposed to meet here?"
And I looked at her and said, "Why, yes, I am."
And like I said,
Just like that.
The confidence.
and like
There
I
you go.
said, the cockiness.
That's what I was thinking.
That's awesome.
Why,
I'm gonna take
yes,
that.
I am.
I'm gonna take that, PG.
So that is how we met. We met at camp and didn't know each other except for Adam. You usually say from Adam, but Adam was the one that told us about each other.
Nice. Yeah.
Now,
Wow.
I got to tell you something
That's funny how that works.
to follow up with this. This is something that makes us very unique. Well, there's a lot of things that make us very unique. But so this is my first girlfriend. This is my first girlfriend. Never had a girlfriend before Kim. So the day camp ended, because of camp rules, we couldn't be a couple during camp. But the day camp ended, we became a camp couple. And then she reminded me that this next year she was going to be going to Argentina for a year.
Oh,
So we had,
no.
yeah, there it is. So our first year as a couple, and I mean, honestly, it was so hard, but I would prescribe this for any young couple because none of the physical distractions were there. None of the friend group dilemma, stuff's there. All we had was phone calls. All we had was written communication. All we had were, the emails. We made, I mean, this is how old we are. We made
I was gonna
tapes
say,
for each other.
They have cell phones back then.
No, we
Michael.
didn't.
No cell phones.
No cell phones. And so when
Michael's
I
a
was
Gen Z
down there,
baby.
yes, this is how old we are.
I had to wake up at 4 a.m. and call an operator. That's how I got
Wow.
And he had to talk to the operator
In
in
Espanol.
Spanish.
Yes.
To get
Wow,
so.
Okay, that's beyond impressive.
that is putting the work in.
Oh, there's more, but you only have a limit on the time here.
Did you have to send
Yes.
pigeons out?
Okay, we're not that old.
Oh, that's good. That's
Just
good.
kidding. Just kidding.
With that said, I'm curious to hear what you think, Doc, and what Mike think. Why do you think it is so important to get to know someone before you start dating them, Doc? And I mean, really know them.
Like boyfriend and girlfriend. Okay, so I think it's super important because this person, you're thinking about like marrying them, right? So like when you meet someone, before you actually become friends, you're acquaintances, right? And then as you talk, as you experience things together, then you like eventually call yourself friends, right? So if there's a process for friendship, why shouldn't there be that process for finding that partner, which is way more important? Like you said, it's like one of the most important decisions you should make. So then it's no wonder you need to like get to know them really well before you're actually calling yourself boyfriend and girlfriend. That's my thought.
That's true, Mike. What do you think?
I mean, like, we've kind of gone over this with me before in the past. Like, I'm kind of with the idea that the best relationships, or like, I feel more comfortable being a friend with someone before I go into a committed relationship. And that's just because, Pastor Greg, I'm not like the super... I would say I'm confident, but I'm not really cocky when it comes to like girls. You know, I'm not like the smooth operator type like you are.
You got the wrong impression. That was luck. That was all luck.
I mean, that line you brought up, that was pretty good. But you know, I'm more of like a organic type person. You know, we get to know each other, and because I just feel like, you know, I want to be who I am. You know, I want to be comfortable in my own skin when I'm around my friends, and if I'm gonna have a girlfriend, I feel like obviously I'm going to probably spend the most time with them. I want to be comfortable around them. I don't want to be walking on eggshells. I want to make sure like, hey, you know, if I want to watch SpongeBob, I can watch it. Or if I want to have a deep conversation about prophecy or something like that, I can have that conversation and feel like, you know, they're not thinking I'm like some conspiracist or something, you know. You know, I want to be able to know that, and I feel like, you know, once I'm comfortable with that person, then, you know, I just have more trust, and I feel like that's important in a lot of relationships. But you know, that's just me. But I definitely feel like, you know, getting to know someone is like the first step. And, you know, if you don't know someone, I feel like you can set yourself up for hurt and pain. Something that I think all of us have experienced. So,
and I mean, just apart from hurt and pain, it's also a waste of time. And
it's true.
This may just be how I think about it, but I don't want to start down a path with someone who I know I'm going to have to take a U-turn. I'm not looking for a relationship that's, you know, just short term or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So if I can perceive or know that this person is not for me, either personality wise or for some other reason, I think it's really good to not even start something. How well did you guys know each other before you officially started the date?
So we worked at this camp for 7 or 8 weeks that summer, and we got put in the same group on Friday night.
That was like the only time we could really
And that
see
was
each other.
really the only time we got to see each other throughout the week, because he was a counselor, I was the girls director, and so we were super busy. And so we would like long for Friday night, and we would just sit there on Friday night and wait for the groups to come to us, and we would do like a little skit, and then that skit, the kids would see our skit and then they'd move to the next group. So we always had this time in between groups, and we would just sit there and like talk to each other about like, you know, everything.
Wow.
About our families, about school, like what we wanted to do with our lives. And it was not anything yet, you know, like we weren't dating yet. We hadn't even really told each other that we liked each other yet. We were just like getting to know each other, and it was like under very little pressure, because there were other people there too that were talking with us, but we were definitely listening to each other the most. And by the end of the summer, they kind of started giving us like our own time. So the other people that were there doing the skit with us kind of sat a little further away and let us like just talk, the two of us. And so we had that time. And then like, I got to tell you, like every time I walked by him, he always had his guitar. Like he carried his guitar around camp. And so he had his guitar, and he would watch me walk by and be like, "There she goes. There she
There it
goes
is.
again."
That is cute.
That's so fun.
And
That's
I
so
was like,
awesome.
okay, I have never had someone like sing to me, like
Serenade
every time
you.
they see me, serenading me. And so that, of course, started kind of winning my heart for sure, too.
So
I'm taking notes.
You know, to go to your
Yes, Michael. Take some.
to go to your earlier point, Josue, like I think our system is broken, and the dating system is broken. And the reason I say that is, although Kim was my first girlfriend, I had so many. I mean, I don't know if you call them a date, you know, because it was kind of just like a friend from school. We would just go and talk together, a girl, you know, just talk about life, and then I'd go and do something else with a different girl, and I mean, there was one girl who had a boyfriend, but we spent a lot of time together. She was a singer. I was a guitar player. There was nothing even romantic, even close. But in all of that time spent like with these girls, I kind of realized very quickly, man, I really like her, but I could never go further than a friend, kind of thing. And then, but the other part of it's true is it doesn't have to be an official, like, scary date, but you might have someone at work and you realize that quality they have. There's a lot of qualities I'm not compatible with, but that's something my future spouse is definitely going to need to have. You know what I mean? Like, so even though like we're so afraid of that girlfriend or date even, because it's official and now we're on the clock, something like that. The system is broken. But let me just say this. I'm sorry, soapbox a little bit.
No.
When I hear like high school kids say like, it's our 2-month anniversary, I just want to say, no one cares. Like, what are you trying to prove? Like, what? Yeah. Well, who cares? You're not trying to go for longevity of a 2-month in high school. It's about figuring out what you're compatible with, and what the qualities of the spouse might be for your future.
I think something important that we should say is that, like, we should maintain some flexibility. Like, you were talking about, I don't want to waste my time. Okay, sure, none of us want to waste our time. But that shouldn't stop us from having, like, all or nothing conversations or all or nothing mentality.
It's a very good point.
Okay, like, sure, you went out, we're getting to know this girl, but it didn't work out. You could have a friendship from it, It's not like, okay, you didn't work out, thank you, next. I feel like that rigidity, we need to get rid of it so that we're more open and flexible. And I feel like once we become more flexible, we're more open and that person can come in.
And just kind of like, to kind of go off of what you're saying, Pastor Greg, like in the past, we've kind of mentioned like how it is to date or getting to know someone like in the Adventist church. And like one of the things like we kind of mentioned was like there was a numbers problem, especially like where we're at in Wisconsin. There's really not that much. And so we're kind of like,
that's another
I would say forced, but it's natural to want, companionship, want that relationship. And so like when you talk about broken, are you talking about like more so like amongst like just the Adventist church because there's a numbers problem, or because like
society
in general
to the church,
or because like maybe dating isn't probably something we should look at, especially when we're in high school? Like what are...
Yeah, you're not wrong. There's definitely a numbers issue. That's probably another way it might be broken. I think what I was speaking to, what I mean is more the fact that the purpose and goal of and even definition of what a date is. Like for my example, the couple in high school who's been together for 2-3 months, they're in high school. They were so proud of the 2 months versus realizing, I know I could never marry this girl, but hey, we got 2 months under our belt, and they're neglecting the opportunity for them to realize, well, what am I compatible with if I know it's not this, and I think that's one of the things that I was very lucky with is because I had spent a lot of time with a lot of different girls, just being friends, just doing things together, going to banquets and other dates, but also just going to do fun things together, hanging out. When I saw Kim, like, I kind of had a checklist, I had things that I knew. I didn't have it completed as an 18-year-old. Don't get me wrong. But I did have an idea of what I was looking for, and what fit my personality, what fit. And of course, spiritually, I realized that very quickly. I'm going to need someone that can be there with me spiritually. That became so evident very quickly because a lot of my friends simply couldn't, and I was there to support them, their faith. And yet it was just always the give thing. And that's one of the things I noticed so quickly about Kim is she was at camp to minister. She loved people. And it was, as you guys have known Kim for many years, it's just so evident with the way she lives her life. And I was instantly attracted to that, even more than her beauty. It was just her heart, her love for others. That was like the biggest checkbox. And I was like, wow, this girl is something special.
No, that's awesome.
Man, that's awesome.
Speaking of boxes, actually, what do you guys think are some areas when we get to know someone we need to consider? So Pastor Greg just mentioned, he needed somebody who could spiritually punch in the same weight class as he was. What are some other areas you feel like when getting to know someone, people, by people, I mean you, me, and like we should consider?
Okay, so your pastimes. I heard Michael say, I want to be able to watch SpongeBob or, talk prophecy with someone. And so those are check boxes. I mean, yes, they're silly, but at the same time, I mean, not the prophecy one, but the SpongeBob one. But like the fact that we could, we could do silly things like that together. And Greg had never played tennis before.
I played tennis, but not competitively.
And I love tennis. And so
I did rollerbladed.
That's true.
She made me
That's
rollerblade.
true. I made him rollerblade too.
Got lots of bruises to prove that.
And so even though we didn't have like necessarily the same skill level, because he loved basketball and I was not very good at basketball. So what I'm trying to show is that it's not like you have to excel in these things like to get the checkbox, but it's like, will they enjoy it? Like, could we, could we play tennis together? Because, that was important to me. Like, I love playing tennis. And he loves playing basketball and I love watching him play basketball. So that's a check, but no, I'm saying like having things in common is super important.
And you don't stop. Here's another thing too. This is another way the system's broken. Okay. It is when you're friends, you start off as friends, you do fun things together. And sometimes like you become dating and you think, okay, we've graduated from the friends.
We don't have to do that anymore.
And then you go to you're engaged. Okay, we're past the dating stuff. And now we're married. And no, they're not graduations. They're building blocks. They're things that are still a part of that relationship. Like we still play together. We still flirt together. Is that the more professional word? They're still a part of our relationship, and that's important.
Yeah.
Doc, what's another area?
I think lifestyle. Like I know Kim mentioned a little bit about like, what you like to do together, but like how do you go about your day, right? Like some people are very like goal oriented, like this is what I'm doing today. And then other people are just like, I'm going to wake up and then let's see what comes to me. So I think you have to consider what type of lifestyle you're compatible with.
It's true.
So that way, when you get together with someone, you don't nag on them like to be like you, but rather you kind of accept that.
For me, it's kind of like the same with as Myrna. I've always been a goal-oriented person. I have dreams, I have passions. And for me, like, I know I want somebody like that. And it doesn't matter what it is. I've told people I have aspirations for getting into medicine. I've told that on the podcast a number of times. But, it's just something that I'm passionate about. And so I feel like, for me, I'd have to be with someone who's also passionate.
That's real.
And so, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, honestly, it could be anything. Just do you have passion about something? Can I support you in your goals? Can you support me in my goals? That's something that I feel like I'd want to connect with someone on with. And we may discuss this a little bit later, but like, I've always kind of thought about like, well, what should be things that I prioritize when it comes to things that I'm looking for in someone. And obviously I don't want to date someone that's, unequally yoked spiritually, but, getting back to the numbers thing, one of the things we kind of brought up before was like, my dad, and I don't want to put him on blast, but my dad's like, oh, she's a nice Adventist girl. And I'm like, yeah, she is, but I'm not really feeling her. So I'm like, but then I feel bad because I'm like, man, well, she is like, why?
What's the hesitation?
What's the hold up? So I'm like, am I just being like,
hard-headed,
stubborn, hard-headed? Like, am I lost because I don't want to date the Adventist girl? I don't know. Like, Pastor Kim, like, is like, have people come to you guys about that? Like, why am I being hung up on this person when they're like, in the church? Is that something like we should just look for, and then everything else maybe not so much?
I think honestly, if you have to try too hard, that it may not be right, like
That's wise.
yeah. And so it should, like,
If you have to talk yourself into it.
exactly. And like, yeah. And so there is something about, feeling a spark, and so having those things in common. And if I may, unless you want to say something on that too.
No, please.
Okay, if I may, I was going to say one other box too is family, like seeing how they are with their family.
Yes.
And like, is that matching? So like, even though like Greg came from a broken family and I had such a, strong family, like, even though that was different for us, I could see that he still valued family. Like, it was really important to him to have time with his, mom and with his dad. And so I could see that family was important to him. And that was really important to me because, like, for me, family is huge.
She actually introduced me to that box in a way. Like, it's funny, Josue, when I hear you talk, I can totally relate with you about when I am like by myself and not with the family, I become so regimented. Like I am a machine. Like I don't go up the stairs unless I'm like, if I'm going upstairs, what needs to go upstairs? And I take them downstairs, what comes with me? Like I am so regimented, and to the point where like I am just triple tasking, kind of thing. And yet like the house has to be spotless. Everything is like so perfect. And yet like Kim has reminded me, maybe spending time with the boys is more important than cleaning, like, and I guess what I'm trying to say is she makes me the best version of myself. She helps me realize the box I didn't even know was there. And maybe it isn't that important that everything has to be where it's supposed to go. My OCD, mannerisms, but the idea of family, make that time with people is more important.
No, that's true. And that kind of goes to show the importance of personality. So from how I see it, your personalities complement each other. And that's one of the secrets, I feel like, why you guys work well. Kim, what kind of conversations did you and Greg have to get to know each other during that camp that you guys were at, during those moments before the kids came by and the skit and things like that? Now, and forgive me for, categorizing it and naming them, but I guess I kind of want to be specific enough to where people can pinpoint and say, okay, they had this conversation, so that after 7 weeks they decided, we're ready to date, and a year and 7 weeks later they're like, we may even want to get married. So what kind of conversations did you guys have during that period that you were getting to know each other?
So you start out safe, and so you just talk about your high school experiences, like I would, I kind of flexed a little bit and let him know that I was smart. And, told him that I had graduated with a 4.0.
I was a 4.0
Wow.
too. I was freshman class
president. This actually was kind of the way that the conversation went. And so it was almost like a competition at first. Yeah. Like who was smarter, who was more involved. I was like, I was SA president my senior year. And he was like, well, I was SA pastor. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, I was junior class president. And anyways, so we started with those like conversations of trying to like show that, hey, we're quality people. Mm-hmm. But then once we got over that.
Over ourselves.
Started talking about, my family and how important they were to me, telling them about my siblings. And about like teaching and education and And actually, one of the conversations that kind of started bonding us was, and I won't go into all the details since this is, a public podcast, but it was a difficult summer on both of us. Like, some of the leadership was difficult. And so we started talking about that, and we talked about, like, man, I told him I worked at a different camp and you should really try this other camp because, like, our director there, like, really cares and like leads by example. And I learned so much from him, and I just started sharing with him about my spiritual experiences at that camp and how challenged I was. And so then he started telling me about his conversion story.
You remember that? You came to, I think, was it right before you went to Argentina?
Yes.
This God like put this huge burden on my heart. It was this thing like she needs to know how crazy I am about God before we go any further. And so I was like, I made this specific date where all I wanted to do was just tell her how, like, I had given my heart to Christ, and that was where I'm going. That's going to be my life moving forward. And it's kind of like one of those things that if we're going to keep going, I want you to know this about me. And I didn't tell her I was going to be a pastor at that moment because I didn't know either. But I remember that being like so important that we started off on that spiritual foot together.
And then I remember from there, I told him, so my mom called today, and he's like, oh, how was your conversation with her? And I was like, it was good. And he's like, did you mention me? And I was like, actually, I did. And it was the first time that I had talked to my mom about him. And he said, so what did you say about me? And I said,
good question.
Well, I told her that I think I'm starting to have feelings for you. And it was like so nerve-wracking, but I finally just admitted. And so I was actually the first to admit that I was having feelings for him. And then he was like, oh, good, because I have feelings for you too.
It's such a relief.
That's about how it happened. Yeah. That's about right.
Awesome.
What kind of other conversations, Greg, did you guys have while getting to know each other to kind of get a feel for each other?
I don't know if we can give advice on this because we're so weird. Like we jumped into like everything from finances to children to responsibilities to occupations to just crazy stuff. And just like, what kind of we do things we like to do for entertainment, money, how we spend our money, like
why I was going to Argentina. That was a big conversation.
I mean, it was we went to the 8-year relationship talk on our first few months. Like we just
and I don't know that that's for everyone.
No.
Because that can scare people away. But like we could tell that we could just it was safe to kind of talk about this stuff.
And it was one of those things too where not everybody, I don't know if I can say this, but God made it clear that this was my girl to me. Like I prayed about it. The more I prayed about it, the more at peace I was at about it. Like I didn't know how this was going to work out. She's older than me. I'm going to PUC. She's at Andrews. There's so many things, but like God just gave me this peace that this is who I've provided for you. And it kind of like with that peace, there was no conversation off limits. We just if we're doing this thing, if we're gonna go towards marriage, let's go ahead and jump into
I think now. Even like in our first year of dating, my grandma was going through dementia at the time. And so we even had
I didn't mean to laugh, I'm sorry.
We even had the conversation about what are we gonna do about our parents? And this was in our first year of dating.
Yeah.
We were like
way out of bounds.
What would we do if, one of our parents gets to that point? Like, would they live with us? Would we put them in assisted living? Like, what would you do?
Homeschool, private school, public school,
with the, kids and we But
was
I
fun.
mean, but that was
In a weird way.
that was obviously not we I think we are jumping a little bit. I don't think we had all of those conversations in the first 8 weeks before we
No.
started dating. But like
Okay.
within the first year,
Yeah.
probably within the first year, we were having those conversations.
It was
And
fun.
so-
I liked it. It wasn't intimidating. It was
Now I want
it was
to
fun.
ask this question because we had Pastor Zach on here for our first episode, and it's interesting. He mentioned you were kind of like a mentor to him because I think he was in Indiana
Yes.
when you guys were there, and so he was kind of telling us his story about how he met his wife, whose name Allison. Yeah. And it's kind of similar in a lot of ways to what you guys are saying. So I want to ask, like, did you guys kind of have those conversations because you just had that chemistry, or was it because you guys, or more so because you guys had that connection with God? Like God was like, you felt God was moving you to each other. Like what brought about
Or a mixture of both.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. What?
Can I throw some Bible, some scripture at you?
Yes, please.
Because this might explain. I love this verse, Jeremiah 9:23 and 24, where it says, "This is what the Lord says: Don't let the wise boast of their wisdom, or the powerful boast of their power, or the rich boast of their riches. But those who boast should boast in this alone, that they truly know me and understand that I am the Lord." And
Amen.
throughout the Old Testament, this word, it's a Michael. You probably heard me preach on this before, but this word is yada. It's my favorite word to preach on in the Old Testament. Yada means to know. It's also the same word that is used to describe sexual relations. Adam knew Eve. Yada, same word. And the point is, like 177 times in the Old Testament, like God says, "I want you to know me." It's just this whole idea of the more you know me. The parting of the Red Sea, the walls of Jericho, whatever. I do this that you might yada, that you might know me. And it's this word describing this intimate, this deep, this knowing you so much to the point where the more we know God, the more we see the world through God's eyes. And I think. If that's the model, if that's the model of relationship that God has, I mean, God says, "I don't do this so you might be impressed by me." It's that you might have relationship. And of course, yada, it's this intimate, personal, deep connection. And that's the model that God has for this. That's what this relationship is, right? It's this teaches us this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This relationship,
It's horizontal
helps us understand how to have a vertical. That's what this marriage is based upon. And so, I mean, that's kind of like the basis of this thing is if we're going to do this thing, if we're going to try to know to make this marriage work, we got to spend time knowing who each other are. So, I mean, and for example, like I know her so well. I know what she's thinking 95% of the day, I think.
Wow.
I know I see a movie and I'm like, she's going to hate this. I know we finish each other's sentences. It's like we know each other so well. We spend so much time together that like I don't have to necessarily guess, her reaction even. Okay, funny story. I remember she wasn't home. She was doing something and I was by myself. And she came home and I started being kind of rude, like short with her, not rude, but short with her. And so she's like, "Did I do something?" And it finally occurred to me that I had an argument with her in my head and I still lost.
Wow.
I knew what she was going to say. I filled in the blanks for her arguments and I still lost the argument. That's what she didn't even have to be there.
But going back to how we could have these conversations so early on, I think it was because we were serious about it. Like, I think, kind of like you said earlier, that we didn't really want to waste our time if this was not where it was going, And so, especially for me at 21, I was starting to feel like, I was almost out of college and I was like, I need to know if this is worth it or not. So I need to have these tough conversations to see, how he'll react to them, number one. And number two, like, we had been studying together, like we had been praying together. And so it made having those conversations a
Right.
little bit
Right.
more natural and easy.
Yeah. That's very true.
Speaking of speed, what would you recommend now? Is there a such thing as too fast? Like if you were to give some advice to some young adults, is there such thing as too slow? Are there some things off the table? What are your thoughts?
I think it has to do partially with your place in life. You know, like I feel like the older you are, the more you know yourself and you know exactly what you're looking for. And when you find it, I don't know that there's necessarily, I mean, yes, you want to make sure you've dated long enough to know that you've kind of gone through some, arguments or discussions, like you've fared through those and you're not still in the honeymoon stage and you haven't had that. So that's the only thing I would say is like, don't rush into anything before you've had like hard conversations together to make sure that you can work through those together. But yes, and
Knowing
then
yourself. I like that.
yeah.
There's a book entitled Young Adult Life Now that's just coming out. And this is fascinating. I wish I had the graphic. I could email it to you guys if you want to share it with your audience. But Young Adult Life Now, Stephen Argue wrote it, and he charts what used to be the course for young adults. It used to be there's high school, college, graduate, marriage, career, done, right? And now he says, but today it's like there's leap year, there's internship, there's a time for children in some situations, there's second career, there's third career. And he has this web of like lines going back and forth where it's no longer you have to be here by now. It's a matter of different points in life. You have different experiences. I mean, I don't know. You guys have probably heard this statistic that most people are changing careers 6 times minimum these in this day and age. These adults, they're in
crazy.
6 different careers by the time they've retired. It's a different world now.
Yeah.
But as far as speed, I think Kim really hit it on the head. Is you got to know yourself spiritually where you are. You got to have a foundation to know what you're looking for, or at least some about what you're looking for. But I would really say that spiritual foundation with Christ it's paramount. I mean, it's even if you're not like, if you think about it, the people you are closest to, I would be willing to wager in this life, the people that you have the deepest conversations with are people you can talk about faith with, people you can talk
That's
about
real.
spirituality with, and that foundation, whatever road it takes you to get to that point where you've had that opportunity to establish who God is, for yourself. For me, that is such a foundation to any relationship.
And would you say that gives us an advantage as like Christians compared to like dating, I guess, outside of the church or people who aren't maybe in the church and looking in? Do you think that gives us an advantage because we have that?
I would say yes. Like knowing that you have the foundational faith the same. But even within Christianity, there's definitely, what's it, kind of like a continuum, like, and you want to even be like within that same kind of wavelength of Christianity, and because some people are Christian and they'll go to church, a few times a year type of thing. But are you, you want to have someone that is that same, like if you're wanting to be there every week, worshiping together, looking for someone like that. And so yes, I feel like it does give you a little bit more of a focus of what you're looking for in someone.
Now, before I toss the guys a question, I'm a little curious. Like at the beginning of the episode, we talked about feeling seen, and it is my understanding that you never really get to know someone completely, because we're always changing, we're always growing. So when you started dating, what did you guys learn about each other that you didn't know at camp? And then what are some things you learned about each other after you got married that you didn't know while you were dating? That's a good question.
Wow. So
That's
much.
a great question. So you would never guess this. Yes.
I remember walking into his dorm room at the end of the
I was going to say this.
yes,
I think so.
at the end of the school year to help him move out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I walk in and his bed is still like got sheets and blankets on it and stuff. And I was like, "Did you ever wash your sheets this
This
school
is a family
year?"
show. Kim. Oh, no.
Oh no.
And he's like, maybe once. And I was like, gross. So that was something like I
Agreed.
didn't know about him. And I was like, okay, red flag, maybe. That's kind of
Maybe.
disgusting.
Amber Alert.
But then you guys, like,
This
all
is
of a
so
sudden,
crazy.
and the other thing was that his room was like disgusting.
Oh, yeah,
Like
disaster.
trash everywhere. Like, I mean, I was like, wow, he really doesn't care what his place looks like.
Get to the good part.
So then we get married, and all of a sudden something clicked, and it was like his place now, right? It wasn't just a dorm room, it was his place, it was our place, and he wanted to make sure that he took care of it.
I became a clean freak. I don't know how it happened.
Wow.
Yes, and
Other
I did not
spectrum.
know I was marrying a clean freak because I don't think I would have, because I'm not a clean freak. Like, I was like, okay, I can be the clean one in this marriage, you know. I'll have to be cleaning up after him, it looks like, but that's okay. Like, I can deal with that. And then all of a sudden now I'm getting lectured about leaving my...
Well, I think we define office differently. Because, like, for me, when I think of office, I think of, like, desk. But for her, when she thinks office, she thinks house. And so she has papers and stuff, like, everywhere. Like, Kim, don't you have a desk?
Well, let's explain. We work from home now.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I do have an office and I have a desk, but I like to work from lots of different places in the house.
I
Agreed.
feel you.
So I
Yeah.
don't like to be confined to one room, and so I'll be downstairs sometimes in the kitchen, and I'll be at the table and have all my papers all over the table.
But I think the good point we're trying to make
yes,
is this wasn't even something we discovered. Like, we were changing.
yes,
You know what I mean? Like, in our relationship, our personalities, our work ethics, our way of going about life was changing. And so we were not just learning about who this person is back then. We're learning on the fly who they're becoming. You know, and that's kind of a
true.
cool thing. Yeah.
It's very important, and especially when kids came along, that really like, whew, you had to like be like, okay, there's so many new things here.
So
like,
this is marriage advice right here. Okay, we're jumping straight into it, but
Okay.
you have defaults. Okay, you don't even realize it, but you all have defaults. The defaults from what do we make the bed in the morning? What do we have on Christmas night? What way does our toilet paper roll? You know, like we all
How do
have
we
defaults.
squeeze the toothpaste?
How do we squeeze the toothpaste? You're like, there are thousands of these things, right? And most arguments in marriages happen because she's got her 1,000 defaults, I've got my 1,000 defaults, and if we look at it as a struggle, you know what I mean? We're just going to do this over.
like my default is better than yours.
Because, you know, this is why mine is better. Let's argue about why my default's better than yours. Versus looking at it as this isn't Taylor's versus Chilson's, that's her maiden name. We look at it like this is a new start. It's a new family. It's a new beginning where we can define our defaults. And once we kind of changed our mindset to the battle, to the new family, all of a sudden it wasn't looking at, okay, here it comes. You know, it said, hey, here's another cool conversation. What's our meal on Thanksgiving? You know, what are we going to have family worship? What time? You know, what are we going to study? Like, it was just kind of cool just looking at it that way versus, you know, my way versus your way.
I love that.
Hey, Doc. Now that we kind of have an understanding of like things that we should get to know, kind of when to get to know them. Okay, now let's get into the how specifically. Like, what activities do you feel someone would get to know you better? Like, for example, if a guy were to take you out golfing, would that work for you? Or is there another activity that you feel would work better to get to know you better?
I mean, he would definitely get to know I don't like golfing. I guess, what do they call those rooms? Escape rooms.
Oh, that's nice.
I think that's they would get to know how smart I am.
There you go.
But also, like, I feel like you'd be able to argue because, like, he'd probably be smart too because why would I not get to know
We get
somebody
it.
that's dumb?
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Yeah, that and like a fair, like a county fair.
It's a good one. What about you, Mike?
I'm kind of more of a simple guy, laid back.
We know.
I like, just going out for walks. When I have gone on dates, it's usually revolved around something like that. Or maybe just like a simple stroll through a park or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love nature. I don't know if Pastor Taylor, you.
I mean,
or Miss
they
Taylor,
just
you know
mentioned
about
that they love hiking.
They go
Okay.
on
So,
hikes.
yeah.
So, yeah, I'm kind of that way, but I just love being out in nature. It's just peaceful. It's calm. I love the fresh air. And I'm more of an active person, as you've probably heard like about the gym and everything. So I don't know. I just feel like it offers an opportunity to get to talk. But if I could connect with you on animals or plants, or whatever it is, I just feel like that's a good way to
Here,
know
pause.
the type of person that I am.
Why did you say animals? Did you mean like the zoo?
There's birds in the
Nowhere else
skies.
you would see
I
animals.
don't know, man.
Squirrels.
I mean, you said plants. I'm like,
Animals,
plants I get, but
plants.
animals, I don't.
There's animals. You got you just
Yes.
been outside enough.
Deer.
Bear.
I'm more like Abby. I feel like I have to be doing something with her in order to get to know her. And like I said, I live my life, 100 miles an hour. And I know that when I'm in a relationship, I cannot do that because you can move faster alone than you can with someone. And that's fine. But I guess I need to know and put her through her paces. Like when push comes to shove and there's a lot of ministry that needs to be done and there's a lot of cameras that need setting up and there's a lot of editing that needs to be done. Can she handle the pressure? So I like competitive sports. So or just competitive dates, I should say. So mini golfing. I just want to beat her at mini golfing.
Boring.
Or is it at the batting cages? Or is it at an arcade place where who can shoot the best baskets or something like that? I just want to see if she can challenge, just or just feel comfortable in the what do you call it? Just in the whole living your life, for ministry, really fast. Cause that's just how I envision it. Again, not at 100 miles an hour, but just getting to know her in a or I guess in a faster pace environment, I think works best for me.
So I should also say,
I don't know.
I'm not against the slow dates, but for the first one, if I'm meeting you cold turkey, an activity.
Yes.
Right? That way you can ease into it and then conversation flows. Especially nowadays because people are really awkward when they talk or they don't ask questions. And I don't want to be asking questions the whole time because it's not an interview. But after one or two or three fun dates, yeah, sure, let's go walking or let's do that boring thing you like to do. But we need that foundation.
I tend to just go hey, let's just go, for a walk on the lake or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a quality that you have that's really good. That you're yeah, sure, let's go walk. But then it's if someone tells you let's go cliff jumping, you'll be okay.
I think that's Mike's superpower. He can adapt to anything. He's just all right, and then he's just good at it.
Let's jump out of the plane. Let's go for it.
Pastor Greg and Kim, do you feel there are activities that are better at getting to know each other? Again, this is pre-dating. This is I'm not sure if I want to date this person, that are better than others.
Yeah, movies the worst thing you can do. I mean, you're just the whole time you're awkward. Do they like
Sitting.
it?
You can't have conversation
As a first date, you mean, right? Or just in general?
as a first date.
Okay, yeah.
Like when you're still trying to get to know
Oh,
someone.
yeah. Okay, yeah.
When you're trying to get to know someone, it's hard to have conversation. Yes, it can provide conversation, like you said, like afterwards, as long as you're doing something afterwards too, and you can talk about it. But if that's the only thing, I was gonna say, like, find out, like, if you know that they are really into something. And so, like, I remember doing that for Greg. He was, like I said, so into basketball. And so I would go and watch his basketball games. And like he loved just sitting and playing music, and I would just come and sit and like sing with him, like, and there was a whole bunch of
Wow.
us around like singing songs and stuff, and we just sing. And so, and one thing that we did, like, honestly, if you are like ministry minded, mission minded, like some of those things that we had some really amazing opportunities when we were like just started to date. Was we got invited to do music for lots of
ministry.
different things. And so we would go with a group and do music for, a youth group or whatever.
Public high school retreat at Camp Asable in Michigan. And
Yes. And so like that began, just, it wasn't even necessarily that wasn't our date. It was just like we got to know each other more because we were doing these things together, And so yeah, if there's like a ministry that you're passionate about at church, and they don't go to your church, but they hear about it and they're like, yeah, I'd like to come and do that. Like that's a great way to get to know people, is to see
their heart.
To see their heart, and to see like especially if it's an outreach project, like feeding the homeless, or like do they share those same values with you, those same passions. And so when you have those opportunities, like that's a safe, because it doesn't feel like a date. It feels like you're just inviting them to go do ministry with you, but like you have that
really get to know a person.
You get to know them. And so those kind of things too, I feel.
Do you guys feel like there should be a priority to one-on-one session, or like getting to know you sessions versus group?
So I guess maybe I could answer that with what Michael was sharing. Like I love the nature thing too, and looking back on that, like we've done that since day one. Like we used to we actually went on a walk together at camp. I don't know how we got away with that, but that's always been something where
Breaking the rules.
we just debrief like life. We debrief what and from the very beginning, it's been fun to kind of hear her take on something that happened, and we'll talk about it. And even just, I mean, nowadays, like I think you guys might not know, but my mom is dealing with Alzheimer's, and 25 years later, we're still going on walks debriefing. We started that from day one. Before we were even a couple, is just kind of debriefing life and what's going on, and getting to know her thoughts on how things. And I guess it doesn't have to be a walk. I love nature. There's something about nature that is just,
It is.
I don't know, it's just perfect.
Soothing.
Perfect. You could do it, I guess, when you're puffing.
Puffing? What are you doing while putting?
Don't puff, guys. Don't do that. Not again. But just something that provides that opportunity to like hear each other and get to know each other.
But I want to counter and say, at the beginning, we almost always had Greg's best friend with us.
It's true.
Poor guy.
Oh, the third wheel.
You guys
And-
have
I
a
was
third
surprised.
wheel.
So
Yes. And so he even went on our first date with us.
that was hilarious.
And so Greg was like, let's go to a baseball game. And so the three of us went to the baseball game.
That was the worst third wheel.
And he's like, I am
Absolutely.
hating this right now. I really wish I were not here. But it made it a little more comfortable for me. Just knowing that there was someone else there to help with, conversation. I wasn't really worried about that with him, because we could converse pretty well. But I feel like it does take off some of the pressure. Like you don't
Doing
feel
the
like
group
you
thing?
have to. Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
You don't have to come up with it all. Like you have other
Yeah.
people contributing, and you can hear more of their thoughts because you might not think of the question to ask, but someone else does, and you're like, oh, that was a great question. Like I probably wouldn't have thought of that. So I think
I
there
see
is
where you
some
went with that.
value to that at the beginning.
Was that conscious in both of your minds? Because I've been on dates and, I'm like the whole time, oh, what do I say? Like, what question do I ask? Like, what? Are they bored? Like, I got to ask something. Does she think I'm like boring? Stuff like that. Like, did you guys go through that stage quickly, or was it just kind of like,
Or did you even have that
Did you
stage?
even
Because
have that
I get
stage,
the
yeah.
impression you guys were pretty comfortable
yeah.
with each other pretty soon.
I think I'm a talker. So like maybe for him, he probably felt that way. But like I just kept it going because I was like,
I didn't have time to think, what is she thinking? Because she keeps talking. So
I've had that problem all my life. I used to get in trouble in the elementary school classroom because they were like, Kim, you need to stop talking.
there was always a little bit of that. But no, we jumped right into the conversation pretty early.
Yeah. But there's always a little bit of, that awkward silence, and it's okay. Like, that's okay. That doesn't mean you're not a good conversationalist. It's just getting over those uncomfortable, like, getting to know each other.
I do remember like getting to the place where you didn't think you had to talk the whole time.
Yes,
Like, that
that's
was another
a beautiful spot.
That's nice.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a whole other part of the journey.
Let's kind of wrap it up a little bit by talking about like once you kind of get to know someone, I feel like there's some hard conversations that need to be had. Now, Kim, you kind of just mentioned it just kind of off the cuff. We talked about finances and kids and things like that, but that's not something to be, just light or taken lightly. What are some of like the hard conversations that like people should have when getting to know each other? Abby, let's start with you, and then we'll kick it back to Kim and Greg.
Like you said, finances, your habits with money, your spiritual life, like what you expect and how it yours is. Also, like I think your take on health, like
Walk me through that.
because like you can be both Christian, both Adventists, but yet see health in different ways. Like, for example, with our parents, for example, mom was always about like following all the steps of health, and dad was like,
More laissez-faire.
yeah, like we don't have to do that. And that was kind of a point of struggle, especially when they had kids and showing us like which way to go and how to eat healthy. So I think that could be a hard conversation. And then you have to decide whether like you compromise or if you're okay with that.
That's fair. Mike, what are some other hard conversations that people should have when getting to know each other?
Well, I've kind of, made it up in my head whenever this happens, that I want to eventually have my own family, have kids. I think that's.
Can I pause you for a second? How soon would you personally have that conversation?
I mean, I wouldn't say it on a first date, but, maybe once I feel like, well, I mean, I might bring it up like, you getting to know someone. Yeah, I want to have my own family, whatever. And then like listen closely to see if they agree with that or not. But, like seriously talking about it, once I feel like we're kind of committed to each other in a relationship, then I would, maybe talk like, hey, like, is having kids something you want to do? Like, how many kids do you want to have? Because, even if you want to adopt, like I even want to, adopt and stuff. So like, those are all parts of it. I want to.
Oh, wow.
I read Ellen White said that you should. And I think there's a lot of kids out there that need that, family and, parents in their life. So, it's something I hope to do one day. Yeah, like the spiritual aspect, like, are you okay with, ministry, being passionate about that, because my whole life, and I got this from my parents, they've always been active in ministry. Even right now, we're like in the midst of building up a church plant. It's a lot of work, it's hard, but it's something, we're passionate about. I'm passionate about, I spend a lot of time with it as well. So, that idea you have of like inviting someone to come and do like a outreach with you on it, as kind of like a date, but I think that'd be something to talk about too.
I agree.
Like, what is your drive for ministry? Like, what do you want to do? Like, where do you see yourself? Because I feel like I'm more the active part in ministry.
No, for sure.
Those
I
are a
think,
couple things.
like, some hard ones that come to mind for me are like your past. I feel like there are many who haven't reconciled their past and how it's affected them today.
That's good.
So if you don't have those conversations, if you don't understand what makes the other person who they are and what makes them tick, specifically in reference to their past, I feel like that can bring about some misunderstandings later on. Like I forget who I was talking to, but I was telling her that, when I was younger, because, my family was going through a lot. Abby was sick. Chris was a handful. I, a lot of times, got the short end of the stick and didn't get a lot of mommy attention or daddy attention, if that makes sense. So, like, I suffered not neglect, but I just didn't get enough of, like, mom and dad, per se. And that changed me in certain ways that now that I know how it affects me, I can be like, oh man, like, okay, that's why I think like this, I think like that. And like, I can let her know saying, hey, listen, like my relationship with my mom is even more special now because, we've grown through that. We've gotten to this certain stage. So it's a little bit more precious for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What about if
So like knowing that kind of stuff.
What about if you have like a bad relationship? Is that something
That's
would want to talk
even
about?
more so, because then it gives context to who you are. I mean, think about it. Like like Greg was saying, he came in the house and he was kind of short with Kim, and she's like, where's this coming? If somebody came from a bad home and they are, being short with the other person, it gives not a reason per se, but it gives some sort of context to know whether that person needs more grace in a certain area than others. So I think it's even more so important. And then, I'll toss it back to you guys and see if you can back me up here, or maybe I'm wrong on this. But I feel like you should also get to know someone in the hard situations and when you're under pressure, when you're going through it, and see how that person responds to when you're not at your 100, to when you're not like when you are at 0 and that person still has to give 100 even during your friendship. I feel like that's very necessary to know, to see how they react to you and how you react to them, and not just like when you're not at 100, but also like when you're encountering loss, when you're disheartened, just things like that. I feel like it's important to know who that person is under those various circumstances and not just those difficult conversations. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, that's I think that's why so many summer camp staff get married is for that very reason. You're working so hard, so many hours, yet you see the person from across the field as they're praying with their kids, and that just does something to you, to see this person like, wow, they really have a passion for ministry. And so yeah, absolutely. You see them at their worst when they haven't showered in 2 days because their kids have been throwing up all night. Yeah, that's a little appeal for summer camp, meeting your spouse. But the hard questions, like for me, like once Kim and I had checked our boxes, the first few compatibility boxes, and we're like, and we prayed together. We had that. I guess the hardest question for me, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, was spirituality. Faith is like the foundation, the pivotal point of any relationship. That might have been the scariest conversation with Kim, is when I, just told her what, this is my life. This is who I am. It's all about God for me. Because like if I had kind of, spilled my heart about my faith, about God, and she'd be like, well, I'm glad that's meaningful to you. Like if that was her response, and she wasn't on fire for God herself, she didn't see ministry as a priority. Like oh, that would have been like a screeching brakes. Like, okay, maybe we're not going the direction I thought we were going. And so, like, yeah, of course, kids and prior relationship, yeah, that's all stuff that's tough. But honestly, that was like the deal breaker question. Like that's one of those ones that if we're not connecting spiritually, if we're not in the same ministry mind, especially for what we felt God was calling us to do, and to hear her heart, where she not only matched mine, but perhaps surpassed the desire to do ministry, to make a difference in her students' lives and young people's lives. That not let alone was not just a deal breaker type of question. It was kind of like, okay, now that we're here, we can knock out the rest of the questions. You know what I mean? Like once we saw that and we're like, we're together, we are united in this ministry thing. The rest of them kind of fall into place, and we can get to them because that was the priority.
And I guess I would add to it that the difficult conversations that are hard for me is when I have to be honest about my feelings and the way that maybe something that he said or the way he said it like hurt my feelings. And I want him to know how it came across, and so that we can move forward, because a lot of people will just like bottle that up.
Let it go.
And they're like, oh, I'll just let it go. He didn't mean it or whatever. He was having a bad day or whatever. But like, it's so important to be honest about that and to like let them know that when they do that, it bothers you or, that kind of thing. And so yes, once you like feel like you can have that conversation, it's so important to communicate those and not bottle them up so that you can move forward in a relationship.
That is so true. I mean, I personally have, friendships that have ended because of lack of communication and just, not being honest or bringing things out. And I've heard other people, say that, in relationships, it just not communicating well enough, kind of led to their demise. So, yeah, I'd say that's very important, even though it's very hard.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, vulnerability is never easy.
But it's essential.
Yes.
And then let me toss this last question out to you guys. Locke, let's start with you again. How can we bring God into getting to know someone?
I think kind of like what Greg and Kim were saying, it's like praying every step of the way. Like he had that inner peace, and if you're always praying about it, always talking to God about it, and having those conversations of spirituality with the other person, God is there every step out of the way. It's not just another box to check off, but rather he's always been in all the boxes.
Yeah.
What do you think, Mike?
Prayer is essential. I think another essential part, at least from what I've experienced and from what I've been hearing throughout the podcast, is, being united in service. Like when you're like come together to serve God and to glorify him, it just brings you together in a way that I feel like nothing else can. Like I've seen that with my parents. They've been in ministry like since I've been born, since I can remember. They've always been doing something. And I was seeing you guys the same way. Like I feel like you guys, wouldn't have been connected if you guys didn't have that desire for ministry. So it just seems like, once you kind of devote yourself to, doing God's work, like he's going to put you in those places. He's going to bring you to meet those people or that person. And it's just going to be like better, it seems. So that's what it is for me.
Yeah, I think for us, it's essential to be so in tune with God that we can only find in like, okay, so this is going to sound weird, but bear with me.
Okay.
I was going to use the analogy of a metal detector, where a metal detector does not detect plastic because it's not what it's built for. That's not what it's geared for. So if we gear ourselves, like the more to God that we are, the more in tune to actually detect the things that he would okay. Does that make sense? So a metal detector only finds what it's designed to find. So for us, I want to be so in tune with God that I can only find and feel comfortable in signaling that, hey, this is in fact what God wanted me to find. So I think, again, this is going to sound cliche, but we need to do the internal work with God so that we are so in tune with him that it won't be as difficult to discern.
That's where like reading your Bible comes in, right? Because like that way, when you see something, you can detect it, right? Like, hey, like the Bible doesn't say that. God actually pushes you against that. So it's like, if you don't read the Bible, it's like, how are you going to know?
Yes.
And I also like to add that I think we should also be able to be so close to God that like remember that he is enough, right? Like at the other day I was talking to God in the car and I was like, if I don't find anybody, like God is enough for me. Like, like he that's the most intimacy that we could ever acquire in the world. And like I've said that before, but it's like I had to like
Feel
say
it.
it to myself a couple times and like talking about it with God. So it's like God knows the desires of our heart and he knows that we want to find somebody. And I know we're talking about getting to know someone, but like that yada with God, like that's the most we could ever reach. And right now in our state of singleness, like we should aspire to get to know God so much that like we're full of
Yes.
him, and when we get to know other people,
It works out too.
yeah.
Pastor Kim, thoughts on how we can bring God into getting to know someone?
I kind of alluded to this earlier, but because I was not at a place when I met Greg that I was looking for a relationship, and my goal that summer, I went to camp not knowing but one person. And my goal that summer was to get to know God better. I was like, Lord, I want you to be my focus this summer. I want to be used by you this summer. I started journaling. I did prayer journaling that summer. And I can look back on my prayer journal at least 5 times. I asked God to take away my feelings for Greg because
it's
I did
written
Wow.
not feel like this was it wasn't the right timing. Like this was not what I wanted. Like take away my feelings from him or for him. And I tell you, I have it written down, and like the next day, my prayer journal would say, Lord, I don't think you're listening to my prayer because I prayed that
I love
yesterday.
He's
And
serenading me
then
now.
Greg sent me flowers, like that day after I had just prayed it. And then, it was like little things like that I kept praying. And then these things would happen. And I was like, okay, Lord, are you not listening to me? Like, and he's like, Kim, are you not listening to me?
Well,
Oh,
Like,
wow.
this
Man.
is who I have planned for you. And so, like, that's the other thing, as you're saying, is like listening for God's voice is so important. And and I was at a place where I was desperate to hear his voice because I felt so alone. And I really wanted to hear his will in my life. And it was at that desperation that he made it very obvious to me the direction he was moving my life in. And it was very scary, and yet exciting. And so I guess, as far as you saying that, like, that's how I knew, and I knew that God had to be the foundation for our relationship from the beginning.
Wow. That's beautiful.
I had my mentor, one of our mentors said to us, like, and I came into this thing with fear and trepidation, coming from a broken home. How am I going to break this, accidentally, like it was broken for me. I remember my mentor said these words. He said, Greg, as much as your heart is burdened for this relationship, God's is burdened even more. You know, and
Wow.
when he is leading, and he said he is a big God. And I think that applies to to friendship relationships, to children, parent relationships, is just to remember that when you bathe this in prayer, you bathe these relationships in prayer, and you just pray that God's will be done. You don't have to put everything on your shoulders because we serve a mighty big God.
Amen.
Amen.
Pastor Greg and Kim, would you guys mind leading us out in prayer? And that God can help us to, when that time comes, help us get to know our partner well. And for our listeners also, that they can go through that journey.
Absolutely. Father in heaven, thank you so much for this time together. And Lord, you are a God of relationships. There's Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. There's this triangle unity of different purposes and different functions, yet one God. And yet you out of this relationship ness, you've given us relationships with our friends, with our those of the opposite sex, with our children, with our parents. Lord, you are the God of relationships, and you know the challenges. You came down here and walked among us. You felt the temptations. You felt the trials. And so, Lord, we want to lift up to you these things called relationships in whatever form they might be. And we ask for wisdom. Where we need to grow, we will listen. Where we need to communicate, we will be willing. Where we need to identify who you've prepared for us, Lord, that you will help us to be patient for that. And Lord, we just ask that you would continue to guide, and may everyone who hears this, Lord, just mostly be inspired to connect with you, to make you the foundation of their lives personally, and listen for your voice. We pray this in your name. Amen.
And Lord,
Amen.
I want to echo what Greg just said there, Lord. I just want to pray for those that are searching right now. They are actively searching for someone to share life with, to share ministry with, to find a life partner that they can go through the ups and downs, and they can be drawn closer to each other through those and drawn closer to you, Lord. And as Greg said, we've got to make sure that we're listening for your voice. And so we just pray that you will maybe speak a little louder so we can hear you, Lord, and that we spend that time with you each day so that we know what direction you are guiding. And Lord, just open our eyes to where you are leading. And Lord, help us, as he said, to be patient on you, to wait on you, because your timing is perfect. And we just thank you so much for this time that we've had to talk about relationships, to talk about how you've worked in our relationship, Lord, but even more in our personal lives, how you have been real to us and how we've been able to share that and minister together. And so I just pray for each one who longs for that as well, that you will fill the desire of their hearts, Lord. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen. Amen. Praise God.